Hey, Brian,
Hey, what?
who do you think people like more, you or me?
Me.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
This is one of those shows that if you don't like the main protagonist, that's another question. Which one of us is the protagonist?
Well, in my mind, I always think of you as like the lead because you came up with the idea for the podcast and reached out to me.
I also think of myself as the lead, but just because I think of myself as a better person than everyone else around me. No, that's not true. I don't want people. I don't want people to think because that sounds like a jerk thing. Oh, by the way, welcome to TV guys. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian. Maybe I'm the protagonist because I know what our podcast is called.
What did I say it wrong?
No, but you almost forgot to announce who we are.
I knew what it was called. I just forgot our whole thing. I forgot that we were doing something. So that's what that was. This is gonna be the episode. This is just how it's gonna be. So we are talking. Okay, when we first started, speaking of coming up with the episode with the podcast, when we first started, we had an episode very early on. I think it was our second one where we talked about main characters of shows that were just the worst. We're gonna do something similar to that, but it's definitely going to be different. Where it's going to be what are shows where you don't really like the protagonists, and we're going to go from there. And I've got a couple shows. I got one that I like, and then two that they're funny, but it's hard for me to get into because I need to like the protagonists. I don't know about you, Brian. I need to like the characters.
I don't always need to, and that's why I only have two, but I have one that I can talk with about double the length of time. So it evens out.
In the episode, that first one that we did on number 2, where we talked about bad protagonists, we really railed on Ted Mosby. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but you don't have How I Met Your Mother as one of them, right?
No.
See, and that's the deal with How I Met Your Mother is because you have one of the most likable characters in television history in the form of Marshall Erickson. Yeah. I don't think anyone watches that show and it's like, I don't really like Marshall. He's just great. And he's what helps center the whole show, that without him, I don't think that show would have been a success. And then you have a character like Barney who you wouldn't like in person. And he has annoying things because, let's be honest, he's a villainous type person. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to root for that type of person, but he does have comedic lines. He has a unique take and he adds something to the show that is very different, even if he's very problematic. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Ted, you're just like, okay, shut up. I don't want to talk. I don't want you to talk anymore.
Yeah.
Unless you're Paul, who loves Ted.
I knew you'd bring him up. Yeah.
Well, you had to. You have to. When he fought us that much about our take on Ted, and we've already talked about this. We already talked, even in other episodes, we talked about how we don't like Ted Mosby. Yeah. So let me instead pivot, and we'll talk about a show that I know both of us have seen that I don't like any of the main characters until they introduced a couple other side characters a few seasons later. And it's actually a show that I'm watching right now with my wife because it's the only show that I can think of. I don't like the protagonists really, but I do enjoy the show enough, and that's The Big Bang Theory.
Okay. I've been watching that too, actually.
Sheldon can be funny. Of course, they all have jokes and they all have good humor. And so there's times when they'll all have something funny, even if you don't like them. But Sheldon is very hard to root for. He does have some moments, of course, because anytime you're looking at any person for that amount of time, you're going to see the positives about them. And the show does a good job of trying to bring some of those out. But he is just such a hard character. And I know that's a point of him, but it's hard for me to want to root for him. So both him and Howard, because Howard is perverted and kind of creepy and just, I know that was just shtick. And then they changed him with Bernadette, but he still had an element of that there. Those two characters, go ahead.
If they didn't bring in Bernadette, he would have been unbearable for 12 seasons. He's still annoying and probably the least likable of the main 7. But if they hadn't brought in Bernadette and early Howard had been there all along, all 12 years, the show would be very hard to watch.
Yeah. And so actually my favorite character of the show, because the other 3 of the main, you have Penny, Raj, and Leonard, and all of them are fine. They all have their weaknesses, of course. But, with certain characters, you always their weaknesses outshine their positives or not. I don't feel like these guys are so much like, oh, I really like Raj, I really like Leonard. They have funny lines. They're fine for me. So there wasn't anyone like Marshall from How I Met Your Mother that I was like, oh, I'm rooting for this guy until Amy came along. And I really love Amy. She is my favorite character by far because they took what was good about Sheldon and then they took away the bad from Sheldon and they gave her good characteristics, they gave her a good heart, and she was a very emotional centerpiece for the show, and it helped to balance out Sheldon a lot. And I think that was like one of the best decisions that they made with this show. I really, really liked it when they brought her in.
Yeah, she is really good. And is she still one of the hosts of Jeopardy now?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole thing. Well, let's bring in the host for Jeopardy. Oh, people hate him. Okay, well, we're not going to have them host Jeopardy. That there is so many ways that they bungled the handling of that, but at the same time, too, people are treating being the host of Jeopardy like you have to, like the next pope. I'm like, okay, they're just asking trivia questions. I know no one is going to hold up to Alex Trebek. No one can possibly hold a candle to this guy. But like the criticism for every single person.
Yeah, like apparently even Maya Bialik, who's the one we're talking about, she played Amy on Big Bang Theory. I guess she made a tweet or something like that saying like, I never know people be this up in arms about who hosts Jeopardy, and people are like, oh my gosh, she doesn't even like her show. It's like, calm down, people.
Yeah, I mean, Jeopardy is a great show. Alex Trebek was a great host. I personally think that LeVar Burton probably would have been the best in terms of personality to host it, following similar to Alex Trebek. I think that would have been a really good pick. But I mean, I don't have a horse in this race. I'm not losing sleep over the fact that LeVar Burton is a hard no, to quote Pierce.
Yeah. I don't remember. And, LeVar Burton also made a similar random guest appearance as himself in Big Bang Theory. I don't know if you've gotten to that point yet.
He did twice. Being on Sheldon's show with Flags.
Oh yeah. And yeah. So going back to Big Bang Theory, my favorite character, I agree that a lot of these characters are so unlikable, is Leonard, because at the very beginning of the show, it was an ensemble show, but it really was Sheldon, Penny, and Leonard were the main three. Yep. And you said Sheldon his annoyance and his quirks are hyped up for the show. And then Penny too. Penny is the one who's like the cool kid. Like she's the one out of all of them that's not like the nerd intellectual. And so there's so many times that she like judges them for it. And sometimes they're being overboard because that's also part of the show. But sometimes it's just like she has the mentality of, oh, comic books, nerd. Oh, you watch this show, nerd. And like, yep. You and me are not maybe quite as nerdy as these guys, but when it comes to certain topics, we're pretty close.
Yeah. As if you listened to our Stranger Things episode last week, you heard that little bit where we went off the rails about Muppets Haunted Mansion, and Dan's like, wow, what am I even here for right now?
Well, first of all, you say a little bit. It was probably like 20 minutes. And
it wasn't 20. It was probably about 10.
Okay.
Still.
Yeah. And it wasn't off the rails since we planned ahead of time. We actually told Dan ahead of time, hey, we're going to talk about Muppets Haunted Mansion. If you want to watch, you can talk with us. And he didn't.
But still, I mean, and 10 minutes was really scratching the surface, because I know for you and for me, we both could have talked about that more.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you're welcome, Dan. We saved you from having to be there for much longer. But yeah, that's one of the negative characteristics is when Penny gets, kind of higher on her horse of like, and that's one of my problems with all five of the characters is because they all have these moments of, oh, I'm better than you. Like I'm not a fan of that characteristic trait. And when I see that presented on screen, I immediately have a dislike for the character in that moment. And if they do it too much, I'm going to end up disliking that character for a long time. And I don't ever feel that with Amy. And so I root so much for Amy of like, girl, go and get it. You're awesome, but you don't even know how awesome you are, except for you kind of have like, she's that unique quirkiness where she has confidence and insecurity, and that is so relatable. It's like you try and project this confidence and you try and believe in yourself, and sometimes sometimes you're able to do it really, really well, and other times you're like, what are people thinking about me? Do they actually think I'm as funny as I think I am, or do they think I'm as cool? All that sort of stuff. So I find her very relatable, and I don't find these guys of like, look at how good and how much better I am, even though I started the episode saying how much better I am than other people. So
yeah, you hate what the worst traits in yourself that you see in other people.
way to point that out, Brian. Way to pretty much call me conceited. Good job.
Yeah. Another great Amy moment that I just watched the other day is Amy and Sheldon build a blanket fort in the living room, and she convinces him to let her sleep the night. And then she like reaches into the couch cushion and pulls out, I prepared in advance. I got like pajamas and toothbrush and all kind of stuff. And Sheldon's like, how did you know we'd be in the living room? And she's just like, who says this is the only one I hid in your house?
I literally watched that episode this week as well. That's so funny. Look, we're at the same spot pretty much.
There you go.
All right. Well, that's one of my picks, Big Bang Theory. What's a show for you that you just can't get behind the protagonist, the main cast?
For me, it is a show that I won't talk about as much because I know you haven't seen it, which is The Ranch.
Okay.
So I would say the main protagonist in the show that they're promoting, even before Danny Masterson left the show for questionable reasons, is Ashton Kutcher, who played Colt Bennett. Because his whole story was that he tried to go off and be a pro football player and failed, and then he came back, and now he's working at the ranch with his dad and his brother, and he's reconnecting with his old high school girlfriend. But he's just so kind of like you were saying with Howard and with Sheldon, he's so full of himself, and he's so like a hothead. Like he's one of those characters that if he's mad at somebody or they're getting in a fight, he will just storm off and leave. And it's just like, it's so annoying because like I hate when that happens, because it's like I want to resolve the argument, and like it's a lot of times it's one of those things where if the characters sat down and talked about it for 5 minutes, they could come to a resolution. Of course, that doesn't make for good TV.
That's a little bit of lazy writing, in my opinion, where it's like this could be handled. Like that's as weird as it is. It's kind of why when I'm talking like thinking of movies, Batman vs Superman came out the same year as Captain America: Civil War, and they're both like, oh, these two leads are fighting each other. But Captain America: Civil War was so much better because they actually talked it out and had a conversation, and they're like, we can't reconcile our differences. We both firmly believe these, and there's a point that both of us have. Whereas Batman vs Superman was like, oh, there's just a big misunderstanding. And that was stupid.
Yeah, you can play those misunderstandings on a lighter level for comedy. Like that's pretty much the whole premise of Three's Company. If you ever watched that back in the 70s, every episode was somebody overhears something, they think they know what's going on, they burst in, and oh, that's not what's happening. I just described the entire series of Three's Company.
Oh, remember that one episode where they thought this was going on and it wasn't? Oh yeah, I remember that one.
You know, it's funny, that exact joke, they made that joke in an episode of Friends. Were you referencing that? Yeah.
I wasn't, no, but I thought after I had said it sounded familiar, but I thought I had gotten it from Community, maybe. Well, I'm like not gotten it, but
yeah, it was a Chandler. They're flipping through TV, and Chandler says, "I think this is the episode of Three's Company where there's some kind of misunderstanding." And Phoebe's like, "Oh, well then I've seen this one," and they turn it off.
It's a good joke.
Yeah,
it's dated now. That's for sure.
For sure. But it's crazy on the ranch. Like it's kind of like we talked about with This Is Us. We're like, yes, a lot of these things that the family is going through are realistic. Like life can be hard, life can be difficult. Families go through hard things, but is this family really going to go through this many hard things all in a row? Like it seems like their whole life is like terrible. Oh, now this character's sick, and oh, now they're going to lose the ranch, and now they got this problem. Now they got this problem. It's like normally you have some period where your life is boring.
You know what? I have seen this show twice, back when it was called Parenthood and when it was called This Is Us.
Yeah, pretty much. It's that with more swearing and more cows.
Oh man, never mind. There is I couldn't pull the joke out there. I'm sorry. I felt like Pierce in that moment where Pierce is like, there's a joke here, and then he like starts working frantically and trying to write it down while everyone else moves on in conversation without him. That's where my brain was.
But on the ranch, the character that I identify with is well, not identify with because I have nothing like him, but that I end up liking is the dad, Bo Bennett, played by Sam Elliott, who he is basically put in a very much a I'm set in my ways. I'm a 70-year-old farmer, and I've been doing it this way. This is how I'm not going to change, and that can be really annoying. And there are times when he is very stubborn and kind of jerks to his sons, but he actually has more character development. And later on in the series, he starts to soften up a little bit to the point where Colt is starting to do the same thing after he has a kid and is like always missing family things to be on the ranch. And Bo looks through an old family photo album and he says, "Look at all these pictures. Notice how I'm not in any one of these?" And his son's like, "Well, yeah, I'm sure you had emergencies at the ranch to do." And he's like, "Yeah, I probably thought that at the time, but if any of these emergencies that kept me from these family memories were so important, how come I can't remember any of them at this point?" And it's kind of a nice moment where he's trying to tell his son, like, I was so obsessed with my ranch that I missed your childhood, and I don't want to see you do that to your kid. And it's like, it's kind of cool. Like towards the end, he's still a stubborn old rancher, but he's a stubborn old rancher who starts to realize priorities in life.
Nice.
Also, I definitely censored out like probably about 15 swear words from that speech.
It's so funny. Like everyone I hear about this show, they're all like, "Oh, lots of swearing." I'm like, okay, well, it's that kind of show then.
That's my pick, yeah.
Another show for me is one that I'm not sure if you've seen. I actually have two that I don't think you've seen, but they're both from the same network, FX, and one of them is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Have you ever watched that?
It's been on my list of like not to watch, but it's like as in like it's kind of in the same vein of shows I like. But from everything I've heard is that there's like no likable characters.
Exactly, and that's kind of the point. And it's not that it's not funny because like I watch it, but it's one of those. So there's types of humor where you feel good laughing and feel bad laughing, and this is the type where it's like you watch an old person get and then you laugh at first and you're like, "Ooh, I shouldn't laugh at that. That's actually not funny." That's for me this show. This show is laughing at things that I don't feel like should be laughed at all the time, and the jokes are well written enough, and it's kind of crazy. I made it through about a season and maybe a little bit into the second season, and I just didn't feel good about it because again, these characters, they're all very, very selfish, very terrible characters. And I know that Danny DeVito wasn't even in the first season. They brought him in for the second season because they're like, no, this show needs a star, and they got him, even though it really didn't for what it was. It didn't really need a star. And so it's for those who love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm not knocking you, and I'm not knocking your taste because it is funny. It's good comedy, but it's not my type of comedy, and it left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And I couldn't get behind any of these characters.
Yeah, I feel like you have to. I don't think you have to like the protagonist of the show, but I feel like there has to be characters that you like from the show.
Yeah, I mean, it takes place in a bar. I believe it's been a while since I've seen, so that's why I kind of skipped a little bit of a synopsis because I didn't know all the characters' names. I couldn't remember all of them, but I believe that these characters, a couple of them, own a bar. And it's kind of like Cheers, but what if people from Cheers were awful human beings? So,
and Cheers also has a rotating slate of characters who can be really unbearable at times, but they always have in the early seasons Coach and later on Woody, who are like the pure characters who like you always root for, and then you have Norm, who's kind of just a neutral observer. So you always had those guys.
Yeah, and you don't have that in this show. I'm sorry. And maybe there's a character that they introduce later in seasons. I don't think there is because any promo stuff I see is all like these people, these same 5 or 6, whatever it is. And so I don't know. I don't think that it ever has that. And I don't think it ever becomes that type of show, which it's fine. It's just not my thing.
All right. Is that all you had for that show?
I do. Yep.
Okay. So my next one is the whole reason I suggested this podcast. It's a show Matt's seen a few episodes of, I know. I was having a conversation with somebody, and they were saying they couldn't get behind the show because they don't like the main protagonist. And I was telling them, no, I don't either. But there's so many good characters, and it was kind of a little bit of a debate of can you this whole thing, can you dislike the main characters and stick the show? And that is Gilmore Girls. I don't really like Lorelai or Rory that much. We've talked about before how much we don't like Rory that much, but even Lorelai. And I know Matt is kind of dreading that we're about to talk about the show, but to give a little bit.
It's okay. I've actually seen some episodes, so I can provide some comments here.
All right. Sounds good. So from Lorelai, her whole backstory is that she grew up in this like a little bit oppressive, high class, rich household where her parents, everything was one way. Like your life is set up. This is how you live life with like the rich people. And she didn't want to do that. So she, she got pregnant at 16 and she just took her daughter, left and went to go live in this small town and was like, look how brave I am for breaking out on my own. And yeah, to an extent, that's true. But she also got such a superiority complex from that. She tried to escape superiority and then ended up developing her own superiority because she was always fiercely the protagonist in her own mind. To the point where, like, she always tended to villainize her parents, even when her parents, in their own way, try to reach out and be part of their lives, and later on, even like soften up. She always has it in her mind, like kind of like, oh, my dad's the puppet master. Oh, my mom is so manipulative, and like they can be, but there's several times in the series when she's being overly harsh to them when her parents aren't even being that bad. And then Rory was brought up. Everybody in the show, like the parents, the grandparents, everybody is like telling Rory, you're the best. Like, if anyone doesn't like you, that's their problem. Like, you're the best writer, you're the best student. Like, how dare anybody not love you? And that's going to mess with a person when you get that superiority. And you see it, especially when she goes into the college years. Rory expects everything to be handed to her, to the point where when someone tells her, you don't have it, you don't have what it takes to be a journalist. And that guy was kind of being a jerk too. But she spiraled so much that she went with her rich boyfriend and stole a yacht. It's just like she can't handle being told you're less than great. And it's just, those are really annoying traits. And like the whole point of the show is that they are better than superiority, but that makes them like have a superiority complex within themselves.
And the way that they hide that is with this quick-witted dialogue. Like the quick-witted dialogue, it's it's at a certain point you're like, oh, this is smart. Like when you first maybe are watching the show or something, like, oh, look at this back and forth repertoire that they got. This is fun banter. But it gets old. It gets old. It's like there's so much deflecting that they do in those sorts of comments and those jokes. And, you're right that there are these characters. I like Luke because he's this down-to-earth type guy. Yep, and I've seen the episode that I've seen, I don't see too many flaws with him, but like even the flaws that he has are the ones that in your friends, if they have those flaws, you're like, dude, I still love you. I get that that's a weakness of yours. I'm not holding it against you. Obviously you wish you were better, but whatever. They're not the ones that is like, I don't think I can hang around you because of this. But all the other characters, and even like and I think Suki is another character that I don't have a huge problem with a lot. I've seen a little bit of like, she's this perfectionist in the kitchen, and that really is her big weakness. But like every other character, I don't like Paris. I don't like the like concierge guy.
Michelle.
Oh,
I like Michelle.
Michelle.
He's the one where if he was on the show more, it would get annoying. But he's on there just so few that he can come in and just like be rude and snotty and make a good one-liner. Like at one point, he refuses to answer the phone. He's like, "People are stupid. I can't talk to any more of them today." And so because he's on there so little, I like him. But continue.
Yeah, Lorelai's mom. She like every time I hear her and I don't see her because Angel will watch it and I'm not like watching it. I like I can't get Susan Sarandon's face out of my mind. Like her voice sounds so much like Susan Sarandon's, but obviously it's not her. Lorelai's dad, he definitely is better than those, but he still is that same type that you're talking about. And we talked last week when we talked about Stranger Things. I brought up how I hate entitlement. I really struggle with entitled characters, and that is this show. All of them are entitled. Sean Gunn, by the way, the whole town, like Sean Gunn's character, and then like I don't know who this is, but I've seen this one guy. Maybe he's the mayor. I don't know. Like, but this is a very legalistic guy. I
Taylor,
think
yeah.
he's bald. Yeah, that guy. I'm like, dude, do you have bigger things to worry about than like people jaywalking in your small town or whatever he is complaining about in that episode?
The thing is that what I like about Taylor though is Taylor is a good foil for Luke because Luke is the one in the town who will just like go on a rant and yell at Taylor and like they have their own like bicker fighting thing and you're usually on the side of Luke because Luke is the reasonable one, but seeing them fight is so funny that like and that's the thing, like, the town is full of these quirky people and their interactions are just so funny. Like the episode I was going to give you when I was thinking I was considering giving you that for like the episode when we were trading episodes was one where like the whole town plus Paris plus the grandparents, like all the main characters end up having a dinner at the inn, and it's just seeing all these different interactions between people, and it's just I think it's one of the best episodes because I love the quirky townies, and yes, it's kind of like a revolving. I'm using that term a lot, revolving door of like who's unlikable in any given scene, but it's like a lighter, funny, quirkier, unlikable when you're talking about the townies.
Gotcha.
And with the grandparents absolutely start entitled and in superior and all kind of stuff. They do much better with the grandparents as far as character development because over time they start to soften up a little bit, kind of like what I was talking about with Sam Elliott's character on the ranch. Where like at the last episode, which ended up being kind of nice because it was Ed Herman who played Richard just the last episode because he died before the finale, before the reboot came, and he had this moment where he's talking to Lorelai and said, you know, because the whole town got together to make this big Bon Voyage Rory party, and he's like, to inspire this kind of stuff, like you must have been a really great inspiration. And it's like, I wish that we hadn't pushed you away as much and had this nice moment at the end. And then in the revival, his death definitely was a catalyst to Emily becoming kind of like realizing what's important as well. And so I think they ended up in the end making both the grandparents much more likable and making Rory much more unlikable.
Yeah, Richard has his moments where I'm like, that seems really nice and really kind, but then he also has his side where it's like he's clearly that New England type of rich man where he lives in his own type of world, very patriarchal as well, and like, you know, he's probably racist, he's probably sexist, he's probably that set in his ways sort of guy. Is like, you know, I know that if I've seen more episodes, I would have a lot more problems with Richard, would be my guess.
Yeah, Richard goes back and forth. He's definitely more likable than Emily overall, but you also have to keep in the back of your mind, like, this is the only life he's ever known. Like he was raised in the rich New England society, and he didn't ever really have to struggle, and so he can't understand what it's like for someone who ever has money issues, really.
Yeah, I think a big help is I can't remember his name, but I do like the actor. He does a really good job in the movies that he's in. You know, he always does kind of play like this waspy type, like he's the dad in Richie Rich. Yeah. So I mean, he always plays this well-to-do type person.
Yeah, it's Ed Herman is the
Ed Herman. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I know you said it a couple minutes ago, but I didn't click in my mind that you said it. So
I think it's a contract thing, but he's credited in the theme song as special appearance by Ed Herman, which makes you think, oh, he's not in a lot. He comes in. No, he's credited as that in every episode, no matter if he's in it or not. So he's basically a series regular that's credited as special appearance.
Well, all of his appearances are special. All right. They touch you in the heartstrings.
There you go.
All right. My other show that I was talking about, because I said got a couple from FX. But the other one is The League. Again, I'm pretty sure you've never seen this show.
Nope.
Very, very straightforward. It's about a fantasy football league, a couple of guys in this league. And even though they bring up fantasy football a lot, it's its own thing. You know, it's outside. It's not just like, ooh, am I going to play this? But like the first season is a lot of like trying to figure out, oh, am I going to, you know, this guy is on the injury report. So they like, they find somehow this player's phone number or that he's going to be at a party or something like that. So like, you know, they use that as a premise for some things, but it's kind of this off the wall sort of humor that I can't even think of like an episode where, you know, the conflict that they had in that episode, because it usually is not football related. But these characters are mean to each other. They're all bad characters. They're all bad people. They're like jerks left and right. The only person that's not so much a jerk, but he's like really stupid, and so because he's stupid, the things he does, gets people in trouble, and and stuff like that. It's Taco. Yes, his name's Taco.
Huh.
And he's a fine person, but I mean, again, he's kind of like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie's not so much malicious like the other characters on It's Always Sunny, but he's just stupid, and so being a part of these other malicious characters, his stupidity also enhances their malice, malicious intent. So that's a show. See, with both of these shows too, like, because you haven't seen it, and my guess, knowing some of our listeners, they might not have seen this show too. I'll pivot into one that we have seen, where for some reason I don't know why this show gets away with it, but there's a show that I don't specifically like any of the characters in terms of I want to root for them, but I really enjoy the show, and we've talked about it. It's Arrested Development.
Yep, I knew that would come up.
All of them are terrible. I don't know how this show gets away with it, and I'm like, I love this show. I love Job. I love Tobias. I love Michael. I love Lucille. They're all so funny, but they're so mean to each other. They're such awful, awful people. And you're watching, you're like, you guys deserve all of this bad stuff that's happened to you, but I can't help but to love and be along for this ride. I don't know why that gets a pass in my mind, but shows like It's Always Sunny and The League don't.
I think maybe the fact that the victims and all these horrible things you're doing to each other aren't that great. It makes you feel less bad about the victim, and it allows you to enjoy it more. Whereas if, like, let's say, like, Michael was like the most sweetest, likable character, you love him, then like when they're mean to him, you wouldn't, it would hit home a little bit more. But since Michael himself isn't that bad, if they're mean to Michael, they're like, oh, okay, I can laugh at this because Michael's also kind of a jerk.
Yeah, that's actually a really smart observation, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because I think that is a part of it, is that you have these innocent bystanders, especially in It's Always Sunny. I don't know so much about The League because I can't remember that one as well. But It's Always Sunny, other people get hurt. There's this like priest in it named Cricket that he just keeps. He's like this innocent, nice guy, and he keeps getting on the butt end of whatever happens with this group. And like, he suffers because of what's going on with what they do. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Arrested Development, the victims in that are themselves. They are their own worst enemies. Mm-hmm. So they bring all that pain on themselves. So I think you're right. That's a really good point.
Another show that does this, and I think they do it well, is the running gag in Parks and Rec that everyone's mean to Jerry and doesn't like Jerry, or Larry, or Gary, or Terry, whatever you're going to call him. But they couch it with the main thing is that Jerry is never super hurt by it. He always is able to shrug it off, like, okay, whatever. And then they give him, they say that he has the biggest junk that the doctor's ever seen, and then he has like this beautiful wife, and like they said that some of that kind of stuff is like them making it up to Jerry for everyone being mean to him.
Yeah, like they give Jerry some good moments, and you do like Jerry, yeah, but you also understand why. Like, he's a bit of a sad sack sort of guy, but he's so like earnest, where he's this eternal optimist. He's gonna find the good in everything. So even when they're piling on, and I think they did change that about him, because if you kind of watch the first 2 seasons, he gets a little more frustrated in those seasons than he does in season 3 and beyond. And so I think they realize, is like, no, let's play this differently. Instead of you getting frustrated, let's just make you be a part of the joke. You just kind of go along with it. And that to me is a really good characterization. I think that's a great example you brought up.
Yeah. The one though that it's hard for me to get behind is Jerry somehow puts his belt loop around the slats of the chair, so he's literally belted to his chair. It's like, okay, there's no way that you could do that without knowing what you're doing. You're not going to accidentally belt yourself to a chair, like, not even Jerry.
That's the problem with shows when they have, and Jerry's not so much a dumb character, he's an oaf, but he's not stupid in terms of like Joey Tribbiani, you
Yeah.
know. But that's a problem with like a Joey Tribbiani type character, is that as the seasons go on, they kind of have to take away more and more brain cells. And so, like, you kind of notice with Joey, he's smarter in the first couple seasons than he is in the. He actually has more emotional intelligence in the final seasons than he does in the opening seasons, but he has less, intelligence in the final season.
Like at one point, he's going over finances with Chandler. He's like, "This is our It's like, this is our phone bill." Oh, he's like, "No, that's our phone number."
Yeah. There's stuff that is just like, come on. I know you're dumb, but you're not that dumb. There's no way. But another show, real quick, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I think sometime we should talk about this show because it is a top show of mine. And I might have you next time we do like a watch an episode. I might have you watch one of these episodes. But that's also Archer, and Archer is another. It's very, very similar to Arrested Development. It even has a couple of the same characters in it. It has Jessica Walters as one of the regulars, and I forget her name, who played Kitty on Arrested Development.
Judy Greer.
Judy Greer, thank you. She's a regular as well. But then Jeffrey Tambor's in it. David Cross is in it. But for like guest appearances, and so it is that same type of dynamic, except for it's spies. It's a spy organization, and so this is a show is like you don't really so much root for any of the characters. Maybe for Aisha Taylor's character, she's not as bad as the others are. She's a little bit more down to earth, but they're all just like ridiculous, crazy characters that you're like, you guys really suck. You're so mean to each other, but you also save people. I guess you're a spy organization that sometimes you save people, other times you make things worse. I don't know, but it is a lot of fun. It's a goofy show. It's ridiculous, and it's one of those. I don't really like you guys, but somehow I'm in it. You got me.
There you go. Yeah, and that's on the show. Based on the shows that the people say it's like, I'm pretty sure I would enjoy it. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah.
So I would. You go ahead and give it to me next time. And I already have down to the episode of what I'm going to give you next time we do that.
It's weird. It's a cartoon that has nudity too.
Huh.
Yeah, I know. I guess it doesn't have like actual nudity, but it's like pretty freaking close,
Yeah. That's a weird line to cross.
Yeah.
You have to do it just right.
I don't know if the show does or not, if it does it right, but it does it.
Yeah. All right. That's all I had. I mainly just came in prepared to talk about Gilmore Girls and a little bit of The Ranch.
Perfect. Well, now's as good a time as any to jump into our trivia. And I'm excited for this month. Before we jump into trivia, we've got a great month. Like, I don't know where our inspiration has come from, but we have been like ever since September, we're going to plan out all of these weeks. So we've got a lot of episodes planned. We've got some really good stuff coming for Thanksgiving. We actually have like this really awesome idea that's coming in Christmas time that I'm super pumped for. So, just keep listening. You'll see these posts. And if you aren't, I don't know how, I'm not super technologically savvy, but if you're not somehow subscribed to us, whether it's through liking us on Facebook or any of these sites like Spotify that you're subscribed to our podcast or anything, definitely make sure you're doing that. We don't ask for that too much, but you don't want to miss some of the stuff we got coming up. So last week we had our special guest, Dan, on. We talked about Stranger Things, and we had two questions, actually. His question was, in season 2, Max, one of the characters, is introduced, and in the second or third episode, when it's Halloween, she comes and surprises the boys at Halloween dressed as what character? Do you remember?
Is Michael Myers, and not the Austin Powers Michael Myers, but the Halloween Michael Myers.
The Halloween Michael Myers. That is correct. Wearing the dyed William Shatner mask. And then my one that I added after that is I had discovered within that week or so that Stranger Things was inspired by a movie from I didn't say when, but a movie that had come out before. And it was a surprise to me what it was based off. Did I tell you what it was after the show got done?
If you did, I forgot.
It's a It's a movie called Prisoners, starring Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, if you don't recognize that title, it's not from the 80s. You would think, oh, what? It's an 80s thing that inspired it, but it's back from like 2013 or something like that. And it's a movie where Hugh Jackman, his daughter is kidnapped, and he's working with Jake Gyllenhaal, the police officer, but he's like I'm going to do whatever it takes to find my daughter sort of thing. And so the Duffer Brothers saw this movie and they're like, let's do this type of story. Let's do a child goes missing type of story. That's where the whole idea came from for Stranger Things. And then eventually it evolved to, well, actually, let's do it in the 80s. 80s would make sense for why this character was able to get taken like this, and and then it just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, and then obviously it wasn't like a straight up kidnapping because there's the upside down and the monsters and all that.
Yeah. So they were just like, kid goes missing. How did he go missing? And then they just kind of developed it there. Did you have a trivia for this week?
I can.
Okay, so here's one I've got then.
Okay, go ahead.
So Sam Elliott, we just talked about it from The Ranch. He, a couple years ago, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Oscar for playing the brother of a famous actor. And what actor did he play the brother of that he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Oscar for?
All right. Actually, I got another one too.
Perfect.
So on Gilmore Girls, Suki was played by Melissa McCarthy and kind of launched her movie career. But Melissa McCarthy was not the original Suki. Even though the original pilot that they like the test pilot, a different actress played Suki, and then she was not able to get out of the contract of the other show she was on, so she was not able to be cast in the show permanently, and they had to recast her with Melissa McCarthy. So who was the original Suki on Gilmore Girls?
I don't know that one. Do you know mine?
No.
Ooh, haha.
There we go.
I'll say it afterwards, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it. Next week, if you have not watched The Good Place, check it out. And then come on to our episode next week, because we're going to be talking about The Good Place. We're going to go a little bit more into depth about that episode, and we are going to talk about its spoilers as well. So now is a great time to watch it. I watched pretty much the whole show again in like a week. It's 4 seasons, and each season is like 8 30-minute episodes or something like that.
Yeah, it's very doable.
It's not that long of a watch, so feel free to watch it. And if you don't get it done by the time we post next week, guess what? That episode is going to be up for a while, so you'll get to eventually get to it. So we will watch it, or we'll talk about it next week. And until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.